breathe through the hearts of our desire, thy coolness and thy love. Let sense be dumb, let flesh retire. Speak through the earthquake, wind and fire, O still small voice of calm. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. As we find ourselves in the midst of another celebration of Black History Month, I could not help but remember Corretta Scott King, who now occupies a seat in the pantheon of the greats of the world, whose sacrifices gave occasion to me to reflect on her enduring mark on the narrative of humanity. For it was Coretta's will that ensured that we carried Martin with us. It was Corretta that ensured that his vision would continue to be spoken of in the present tense. It was Corretta who endured attacks on her family and her marriage because she knew that God had called her to something greater. The Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change was literally created in her basement. It was Coretta's undaunted efforts to do what conventional wisdom said could not be done. She led the successful drive to establish a national holiday for her husband. She was a hero in her own right. She was a mother of the civil rights movement. For she endured the insults of impossibility and persisted in keeping a dream alive until the substance of things hoped for became a reality. She kept fighting, and she kept working, and she kept the faith. She believed in the dream. Even so, there is one thing that we must understand about Corretta Scott King. Her passion, her commitment, her long-suffering, her patience, her tenacity, and her faith were all fueled by prayer. For Corretta understood that without prayer, the mountains of oppression could not be moved. Without prayer, hope for a happier tomorrow could not be harnessed. Without prayer, life is weak and life is anemic. Without prayer, people cannot persevere through hardship and come out whole. And in her book, Standing in Need of Prayer, she said, and I quote, "Throughout the epic freedom struggle of African Americans, our great sustainer of hope has been the power of prayer. We prayed for deliverance in a dozen African languages, chained to the holds of slave ships, on the auction block, in the fields of oppression and under the lash. We prayed when we followed the drinking gourd on the Underground Railroad. We prayed when our families were torn asunder by the slave traders. We prayed when our homes and churches were burned and bombed, and when our people were lynched by racist mobs. So many times it seemed our prayer went unanswered, but we kept faith that one day our unearned suffering would prove to be redemptive. My parents made sure that prayer would be a regular part of my life," she says, "and it has been to this very day at that part. Prayer is how we open our hearts to God, how we make that vital connection that empowers us to overcome overwhelming obstacles and become instruments of God's will. And despite the pain and suffering that I have experienced and that comes to all of our lives, I am more convinced than ever before that prayer gives us strength and hope, a sense of divine companionship as we struggle for justice and righteousness." Yes. This week I grappled with the words of our gospel text today as found in the book of Mark. And if I might be transparent for just a moment, I must admit that the gospel spoke to me and my situation this past week. God's word got into my business and shook some things up in my life. God spoke to me clearly in this text as I I hope God will speak to your hearts today. Therefore, let us fix our focus for a moment on the portion of today's gospel which reads as follows. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. These last few weeks, if you have been paying any attention to the lectionary, have been journeying with Jesus as he began his new ministry on earth. The prior day had been quite demanding, and the new one promised to be the same. Now that people were aware of the authority with which Jesus taught and the power with which he could deal with difficulties, Jesus had little opportunity to have time to himself. Ever since Jesus cast out the demon from the man in Capernaum, the people would not leave him alone. News about him spread quickly, and his fame preceded him, and people began pressing upon him for healing for their problems. This was, however, Jesus' job, wasn't it? It was what he was made to do. It was for this reason that he came to earth. He came to meet the needs of humankind. He came to give sight to the blind. He came to heal the sick and to raise the dead. He came to cast out demons. He came to proclaim release to the captives. He came that all might have life and have it more abundantly. Jesus had a mighty task in front of him. The needs were so great. And how on earth could he meet them all? How would he have the strength in his own humanity to keep up with the demands and the pace? How would he always have the strength to keep facing the crowds and the supply to keep giving of himself, even unto death? Some of you all know what I'm talking about today, because you have been giving and giving and giving of yourself, and now the tank is on E. People need you, yet they are wearing you out. And so given the demands of everyday life, demands that are placed on our time and our energies, I ask you, beloved, if Jesus needed help, what about us? Every day there are needs to be met, and decisions to be made, and business that we must attend to. Every day there are people to relate to, and conflicts to resolve, and activities that require more than we in our own strength can achieve. And so if Jesus needed help, what about us? That's why the ancestors used to sing, steal away, steal away to Jesus. The ancestors sang this song sometimes as a secret signal, a prelude to escape to freedom. But the ancestors also knew the freedom found in going to a quiet place and calling on the name of the Lord. Every now and then they had to meet God in that private space. They had to go to a deserted place out in the fields or over in the woods and have a little talk with Jesus, who was able to make everything all right. It didn't take Jesus long in his ministry to figure out the practicality and power of a rendezvous with the Creator. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. Even Jesus had to steal away every now and again. Yes. For Jesus knew that he needed help, and that he could not live in this world without the power of God. If he was always going to be giving out, giving of himself, he must do some taking in. If he was going to be spending himself in the service of others, he must then spend some time spiritually refreshing himself. You know, perhaps I was thinking that was the problem with Simon's mother-in-law. She had served and served until she exhausted herself to the point of sickness, and she needed to be lifted up by Jesus in order to continue in her purpose. For the Bible tells us that when Jesus took her hand, her fever left, and she was able to get up and do the job that she was given to do. She got up and began to serve them. Jesus knew that it was not humanly possible to accomplish all that he needed to accomplish each and every day of his life in his own strength. And beloved, I got news for you. Neither can we. Jesus knew that whatever he needed, whatever he lacked, God is able. God is all powerful. God is our refuge and our strength. God is a very present help in time of trouble. Whatever he needed, God had it. Whatever we need, God has it. And not only does God have it, but God is ready to give it. And I love what Cynthia Hale said, because that's really what prayer is. Dr. Cynthia Hale said, prayer is coming to God. Prayer is seeking God. Prayer is the appeal of the soul to God. Prayer is standing before God as an empty pitcher before a full fountain. Prayer is connecting with God, who is the power source. Prayer is opening ourselves up to God for nourishment, as the flowers and trees open up to their environment, the air and the sunlight and the rain. Prayer is communing with God. It is living an intimate relationship with God. Surrendering all that we are to all that God is. As Jesus did, who said, the Father and I are one. The works that I do are not mine, but the one who sent me. Not to pray is to be guilty of the incredible folly of ignoring the possibility of adding God to our limited resources. In prayer, Jesus sought the strength that only communion and fellowship with God could provide. And so, beloved, what about us? What about us? Let's be honest with ourselves, though. Most of our rendezvous with God are not planned. Our prayers are sometimes occasional and spontaneous and spur-of-the-moment prayers. If we meet with God, it's usually a call meeting. It's usually in a crisis or an emergency when our backs are up against the wall, your bills are due, or your spouse is acting crazy, your children are acting crazy, your health is failing, you got a deadline at work, and you got a test coming up, and we've tried everything else. And in our desperation, we call on God as the last resort. The fact of the matter is that it is only when something big comes up that we take the time to talk with God about it. But you know, I've come to discover in my life there's no way to treat the lover of our souls. There's no way to treat the one we claim to love. There's no way to treat the one who gave his all and his only for us. And you know, I would imagine that God would feel like we feel when people we love only have time for us when they want something from us. If we say we love God, then we ought to take time to spend some time stealing away in God's presence. Why not take the time to talk to God and let God talk to us? You know, I must confess, as I mentioned earlier, that this past week was certainly a challenge for me. It was a challenge for me. It was a rough one. It was one of those weeks which caused me to wonder if it was ever going to end. And so I realized that every now and then I've got to steal away and spend some time with God. You've got to steal away to a quiet place and take the gods that you have made for yourself before the God that made us all, and place ourselves and our idols sub spatial eternitatis, under the gaze of eternity. We've got to take the time to steal away. We've got to take the time to steal away, beloved, to a place with few distractions, a deserted place, for we live amidst the crowded noise of the world. And it is hard, if not almost impossible sometimes, to hear God. We got to contend with husbands and wives, and TVs and computers and iPhones and radios and pets and other people that keep up noise. Some of us say that we pray and try to talk to God, but God doesn't listen to us. Well, I got a newsflash. God is talking God's head off. But we can't hear God speaking because of all of the distractions in our lives. And so that's why we need to steal away to a quiet place, a quiet time, to have a little talk with the Savior. And so in our desperate hours, we will be able to make a quick connection because we've been connected all along. And even at the last, we can gather the strength to run on. You know, when Jesus came to his Gethsemane, you remember that? When Jesus was about to face his awful fate on the cross at Calvary, you know what he did? He prayed. He went to a quiet and a private place to pray. For in his desperate hour, he knew that he had to steal away. Luke says that Jesus prayed in an agony of desperate pleading until sweat like drops of blood fell from his brow. God at that moment infused him with strength and got him ready to face what he must face. Just like he got the ancestors ready to face the dogs and the hoses. Just like he got them ready to face the bombs and the beatings. It is through private prayer that God gave Jesus the strength to endure. And after Jesus had spent some time with God, his empty fear was filled with fortitude. Jesus got up, and I can imagine he faced forward as if to say, it's all right now. It's all right now. Let enemies come, because it's all right now. Let friends forsake, because it's all right now. Let storms come and wars wage, because it's all right now. Let courts lie and governments oppress, because it's all right now. Let them kill my husband, but they can't kill the dream, because it's all right now. There's a heavy cross ahead, but there's a bright crown beyond that. And so prepared by prayer, prepared by communion with God, we can face whatever the task and trial ahead of us in the certainty that indeed our God is able. When you leave this place, beloved, I dare you to go and find a deserted space and listen to God talk to you. The ancestors, understood the need for a quiet place and a placid time to hear God. And they used to steal away to secret places to meet God, and they used to sing, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody.